In an aquarium in England, a mantis shrimp once punched through 6 millimeters of glass. It took exactly one strike from a single animal to cause the damage. The aquarium staff found the crack the next morning and had no idea what caused it. Then, staff pulled the overnight security footage to find out what happened. A single creature the size of a finger had cracked reinforced aquarium glass with one hit. This is not an exaggeration, and it is not an isolated incident. This is not an isolated case. It has happened in multiple aquariums around the world. Aquarists who keep mantis shrimp now refer to them as thumb splitters because the strike is fast enough and strong enough to break a human finger on contact. Today we are talking specifically about the mantis shrimp and why it deserves more attention. An animal that, despite its name, is not a mantis and is not technically a shrimp, and turns out to be one of the most physically and visually extreme creatures on the planet. Let's start with the speed, because the speed is what gets discovered first and disbelieved longest. A mantis shrimp can accelerate its front claw at 23 meters per second. That is roughly the same acceleration as a .22 caliber bullet, leaving the barrel of a gun. All of this generated by a creature that weighs only a few grams in total body mass. The acceleration involved is so extreme that researchers initially assumed their measuring equipment was malfunctioning. They had to rebuild their test rigs multiple times before accepting the numbers were accurate. The claw itself does not move using direct muscle contraction the way most limb movement works. It works more like a loaded crossbow than a muscle-driven limb. The mantis shrimp slowly loads tension into a spring-like structure in its arm over a period of time, then releases that tension instantly through a latch mechanism. The muscle is not what generates the speed. The muscle loads a spring, and the spring releases the energy. This is why the strike is faster than the shrimp's own nervous system could theoretically control directly. It is a mechanical release, not a muscular contraction in the moment of impact. And what happens at the moment of impact is where this gets genuinely strange. The claw moves through the water so fast that it creates a phenomenon called cavitation. Cavitation happens when an object moves through water fast enough that the pressure behind it drops low enough for the water itself to vaporize momentarily. A bubble of water vapor forms momentarily in the wake of the moving claw. This bubble then collapses violently, almost immediately after forming. When it collapses, the immense pressure differential generates heat. Researchers have measured the temperature inside a collapsing cavitation bubble at several thousand degrees Kelvin. For a fraction of a millisecond, the water around the strike is briefly hotter than the surface of the sun. Not the core, the surface, but still genuinely hotter for that instant. The bubble also produces a flash of light called sonoluminescence, an extremely brief and faint flash of light generated purely by the physics of the collapsing bubble. This means the mantis shrimp strike produces measurable light. All of this physics happening from one single punch, lasting a fraction of a second, all delivered entirely underwater by a small reef-dwelling crustacean. This was not something biologists expected to find when they started studying claw mechanics. It emerged from high-speed camera footage, analyzed frame by frame in a lab. And here is the part that actually matters for the mantis shrimp's hunting strategy. The cavitation bubble collapse delivers a second impact independent of the claw itself. The shrimp strikes its prey once using the physical force of the claw itself. And then the prey gets hit again almost instantly by the shock wave from the collapsing cavitation bubble. This means a mantis shrimp can kill or stun prey even if the initial physical strike misses entirely. The shock wave alone is often sufficient to crack a snail shell or stun a small fish. It is functionally landing two attacks with one motion every single time it strikes. There are two broad types of mantis shrimp, based on what kind of claw they have evolved. Researchers classify them into two broad groups, smashers and spearers. Smashers have a club-like claw built for exactly what the name suggests. They use it to crack open the shells of crabs, snails, clams, and other armored prey. The force involved is sufficient to break through aquarium glass mollusk shells and occasionally aquarist gloves. Spearers have a different claw structure entirely, sharp barbed spines instead of a blunt club. They use this to impale soft-bodied prey like fish and worms with a rapid stabbing strike. The spearer strike is slightly less explosively powerful than the smasher strike, but it is still extremely fast, and the barbed tip makes escape for impaled prey essentially impossible. Both types use the same underlying spring-loaded mechanism, only the tip of the weapon differs. Now here is something that surprised researchers when they began studying the claw structurally. The Mantis shrimp's club has to survive thousands of these impacts without shattering itself. An impact force strong enough to crack mollusk shells and aquarium glass repeatedly should logically damage the structure, delivering that force over time. But Mantis shrimp claws do not crack or degrade significantly across thousands of strikes in a lifetime. Engineers and materials scientists became seriously interested in this question. A team at the University of California, Riverside studied the microscopic structure of the Mantis shrimp's club. What they found was a layered composite structure unlike anything in human-engineered materials at the time. The outer layer of the club is extremely hard mineralized material, similar in composition to the materials in human bone and teeth, but structured differently. Beneath that hard outer shell is a layer with a herringbone-like microstructure. Fibers arranged in a twisting helicoidal pattern, each layer rotated slightly relative to the one beneath it. This structure is specifically effective at stopping cracks from propagating through the material. When a crack starts to form in one layer, the twisted orientation of the next layer redirects the crack's path. Instead of running straight through the material and causing catastrophic failure, the crack gets deflected sideways and dissipates its energy across multiple layers instead of one. This is now studied seriously as a model for engineering impact-resistant materials. Researchers have built prototype body armor and protective equipment, directly inspired by the layered helicoidal structure found in the Mantis shrimp's claw. A military research program in the United States funded multiple studies specifically on this structure, with the explicit goal of replicating it in synthetic composite armor materials. An animal most people have never heard of is currently informing body armor research. Now let's talk about the eyes, because this is where the Mantis shrimp becomes almost impossible to fully explain. Human eyes have 3 types of color receptor cells called cones. Each cone type is sensitive to a different range of wavelengths, roughly red, green, and blue. Your brain combines signals from these 3 cone types to construct the entire range of color you perceive. Every color you have ever seen is built from combinations of those 3 input channels. The Mantis shrimp has 12 to 16 types of photoreceptor depending on the specific species. 12 to 16 separate channels of color information compared to the human eye's 3. This should mean the Mantis shrimp perceives a staggeringly larger range of colors than humans do. Logically, more color channels should mean richer, more nuanced color vision. But when researchers actually tested this assumption directly, the results were genuinely unexpected. A study published in 2014 tested whether Mantis shrimp could distinguish between similar wavelengths of color. The same way humans can easily tell a slightly different shade of blue from another slightly different shade of blue. Mantis shrimp performed worse at this specific task than expected given their receptor count. They struggled to distinguish between wavelengths that were relatively close to each other. This contradicted the assumption that more receptor types automatically means finer color discrimination. Researchers now believe the Mantis shrimp's visual system works completely differently from how human vision works. Instead of comparing signals between receptor types the way human brains do to interpolate intermediate colors, Mantis shrimp may process each receptor type as a separate independent channel without comparison, essentially recognizing colors directly, rather than calculating them through comparison between channels. This would mean the Mantis shrimp's brain does far less computational processing for color identification. It offloads the work to the hardware of the eye itself, rather than to neural processing afterward. Human color vision requires significant brain processing to interpolate millions of perceived shades from 3 inputs. The Mantis shrimp may need almost no processing at all, because each receptor already does specific direct recognition. This is a fundamentally different evolutionary strategy for solving the same problem of perceiving color. More channels and less processing, instead of fewer channels and more processing. And the eyes themselves move independently of each other in a way few animals can match. Each compound eye sits on its own mobile stalk and can rotate independently across multiple axes. A mantis shrimp can look in two completely different directions simultaneously. Each eye can also rotate around its own central axis, like a tiny independent turret. This means each individual eye has something approaching full-depth perception entirely on its own. Most animals, including humans, require two eyes working together to judge distance through binocular vision. The mantis shrimp may be capable of judging distance and depth using a single eye independently. Researchers are still working to fully understand how the neural processing for this functions, but the structural capability for independent monocular depth perception has been confirmed. Now, here is the detail that pushes mantis shrimp vision into genuinely unprecedented territory. Most animals, including humans, see using linear polarized light to a limited degree, but the mantis shrimp can detect circularly polarized light specifically. This is an extremely rare visual capability in the animal kingdom. Circularly polarized light is light where the wave pattern rotates as it travels rather than oscillating in a single plane. Very few organisms on Earth can detect this property of light at all, and the mechanism the mantis shrimp uses to detect it is not found anywhere else in nature. Researchers studying the structure of the mantis shrimp eye found specialized cells that function similarly to a quarter-wave plate, a precise optical device used in human-engineered cameras and lasers. A quarter-wave plate converts circularly polarized light into linearly polarized light so it can be measured and analyzed. The mantis shrimp appears to have evolved a biological version of this precise optical engineering component inside a compound eye that is also independently mobile, housing 12 to 16 types of photoreceptor. Engineers studying optical technology have specifically examined this structure, because human-made quarter-wave plates that work across a broad range of wavelengths are difficult and expensive to manufacture using current synthetic optical engineering methods. The mantis shrimp's biological version appears to achieve broadband function more efficiently than current synthetic versions. Researchers at the University of Bristol and University of Queensland have published work specifically exploring whether mantis shrimp eye structure could inform the design of DVD and Blu-ray players, medical imaging devices that rely on circularly polarized light filtering. Cancer detection technology has been one proposed application area, because certain cancerous tissues reflect light differently under circular polarization than healthy tissue does. An animal that lives in shallow tropical and subtropical reef environments worldwide evolved an optical sensing system of remarkable and still not fully understood precision that human optical engineering has not yet been able to fully replicate at the same efficiency and size. Why would a small reef-dwelling crustacean need this level of visual sophistication? Researchers believe part of the answer relates to communication. Some species of mantis shrimp have markings on their bodies that reflect circularly polarized light. These markings are completely invisible to most other reef predators that cannot detect this type of light, but fully visible to other mantis shrimp equipped to detect that specific light. This would function as a private communication channel hidden in plain sight from predators and prey alike. A visual signal broadcasting specifically to members of the same species, while remaining undetectable to almost everything else living on the same reef. This hypothesis is still being actively researched and is not yet definitively confirmed, but it would explain why an organism investing this much complexity into vision lives somewhere relatively small and visually unremarkable otherwise. Now let's talk about behavior, because mantis shrimp are far more behaviorally complex than most invertebrates. They are not simple reflexive hunters. They demonstrate planning, memory, and what researchers describe as personality. Mantis shrimp build and maintain burrows in sand or coral rubble that they defend aggressively. Studies have shown individual mantis shrimp recognize specific neighboring shrimp over repeated encounters. After a few confrontations with the same neighbor over territory boundaries, The intensity of aggression between the two specific individuals decreases measurably over time. This is called the deer-enemy effect, recognizing familiar rivals and adjusting aggression accordingly. A mantis shrimp does not treat every confrontation with the same energy and risk. It appears to remember which specific individuals it has already established a boundary with and conserves its more dangerous and energetically costly aggressive displays for genuine new threats. This level of individual recognition is unusual among invertebrates and was not expected when first documented. Researchers have also observed extended pair bonding in some mantis shrimp species. Certain species form long-term monogamous pairs that can persist for 20 years or more. Both members of the pair share burrow maintenance and defense responsibilities across that entire period. This is genuinely unusual. Long-term monogamy is rare in the broader animal kingdom, and almost completely unheard of among crustaceans as a group. Researchers studying these pairs have found that mates display coordinated behavior, defending the shared burrow together against intruders in a way that suggests genuine cooperative behavior, rather than the two animals simply happening to occupy the same space independently. Mantis shrimp can also live for an unusually long time for a crustacean of their size. Some species have documented lifespans of 20 years or more in stable wild conditions. This is significant because it means the strike mechanism, that spring-loaded claw, needs to function reliably across thousands or potentially millions of individual strikes over an exceptionally long lifespan for an invertebrate. The structural durability of the claw discussed earlier becomes even more significant in this context. A weapon that has to function at full power for 2 decades without measurable degradation. Now, let's discuss something that genuinely surprised researchers studying mantis shrimp predatory behavior. Mantis shrimp appear capable of strategic decision-making in how they approach prey, rather than simply striking at any available target with maximum force every single time. Studies have shown they assess prey type and adjust their striking approach accordingly. A mantis shrimp facing a hard-shelled prey item will often strike repeatedly at the same specific point on the shell, rather than distributing strikes randomly across the entire shell surface. This concentrates the cumulative force on one weak point rather than distributing damage inefficiently. This suggests something resembling tactical assessment rather than pure instinctive reflexive behavior. Researchers have also documented mantis shrimp appearing to learn from failed strikes, adjusting their angle or approach on subsequent attempts against the same prey item or similar prey types. The level of behavioral flexibility documented in mantis shrimp has led some researchers to argue for reconsidering general assumptions about invertebrate cognitive capacity. These are not simple reflex machines executing fixed instinctive programs without modification. They assess, remember, adjust, and in some species maintain decades-long social bonds. Now, I want to return to the strike one more time, because there is a detail that connects everything together. The same explosive acceleration that lets the mantis shrimp crack shells and aquarium glass generates forces that would be genuinely dangerous if applied to human tissue directly. Documented cases exist of aquarium handlers receiving lacerations and even fractures from mantis shrimp strikes. Handling guides for mantis shrimp specifically warn keepers never to handle them with bare hands. Professional aquarists use thick gloves and indirect handling tools specifically because of documented injury cases. The strike that evolved to crack mollusk shells in shallow tropical water happens to be powerful enough to genuinely injure a human hand on direct contact, and the animal physically capable of delivering this exact amount of destructive force is generally between 4 and 18 centimeters in length, depending on species. Measures in almost every case smaller than a typical adult human hand, generating force disproportionate to its size by orders of magnitude beyond what its dimensions would suggest. Mantis shrimp exist in tropical and subtropical waters across the world, from the Indian Ocean through the Pacific and into parts of the Mediterranean and Atlantic depending on species. There are approximately 450 known species currently described, ranging in size, color, and specific claw type across that diversity. Most spend the majority of their lives hidden inside burrows in sand, rubble, or coral structure, emerging primarily to hunt, defend territory, or interact with neighboring individuals. This means an animal capable of cracking glass, possessing among the most complex visual systems on the planet, while also maintaining decades-long monogamous pair bonds with a single partner, spends most of its existence hidden inside a hole in the sand, visible only briefly and only if you happen to be looking at exactly the right moment. Write in the comments if you have ever seen a mantis shrimp in person, in an aquarium, or while diving, because most people who encounter them only see a flash of color before the animal disappears back into its burrow, with no real understanding of what they just briefly witnessed. There is also a side to the mantis shrimp that almost never makes it into popular coverage, and that is what happens after the molt, the period when a mantis shrimp is at its most vulnerable. Like all crustaceans, mantis shrimp must shed their entire exoskeleton periodically to grow. This process is called molting, and it leaves the animal temporarily without its hard protective shell. During this window, the mantis shrimp cannot deliver a full power strike. Its claw structure, including the spring-loaded mechanism we discussed earlier, is briefly soft and underdeveloped. This is an extremely dangerous period for an animal whose entire survival strategy depends on offensive force. Researchers studying mantis shrimp behavior found that individuals modify their behavior significantly before molting. They retreat deeper into their burrows and seal the entrance more thoroughly than usual. Some species have been observed reducing food intake in the days leading up to a molt, possibly to reduce activity and minimize the chance of needing to defend territory during the vulnerable period. After molting, the new exoskeleton needs time to harden fully before the claw returns to full striking capacity. During this hardening period, a mantis shrimp that would normally win a territorial confrontation easily can lose to a rival it would dominate under normal circumstances. This vulnerability window is precisely timed and precisely managed by the animal's behavior around it. It is one of the clearest examples of strategic behavioral adjustment tied to a specific physiological state. Now, let's talk about something specific to how mantis shrimp hunt prey hidden inside hard shells. A smasher-type mantis shrimp does not simply strike blindly at any hard surface it encounters. Researchers studying feeding behavior found that smashers appear to assess shell thickness before striking. They have been observed tapping or lightly probing a shell multiple times before committing to a full strike. This preliminary assessment behavior suggests the shrimp is gathering information about the target before expending the significant energy required to reload and fire the spring-loaded claw mechanism. The claw's loading process is not instantaneous. It requires time for the muscle to build tension in the spring structure. A mantis shrimp that strikes prematurely or inaccurately wastes energy and time. It cannot easily recover. This creates evolutionary pressure toward more careful target assessment rather than purely reflexive striking. Researchers have documented individual mantis shrimp adjusting their striking position after an unsuccessful first attempt, repositioning to target a different and apparently weaker point on the same prey item. This adaptive targeting behavior across multiple strikes on the same target is part of why some researchers argue mantis shrimp demonstrate a level of behavioral flexibility that goes beyond what was traditionally expected from an invertebrate predator of this size and complexity. Now I want to address something people frequently ask when they first learn about mantis shrimp strike force, specifically whether the strike could ever pose a serious threat to a human being directly. The honest answer based on documented cases is that serious injury is possible, but death is essentially never recorded. Documented injuries include cracked fingernails, bruised and lacerated skin, and in rare cases, broken finger bones. These injuries occur almost exclusively when someone handles a mantis shrimp with bare hands directly. Professional aquarium facilities that house mantis shrimp train staff, specifically on safe handling protocols. These protocols typically involve thick gloves, rigid handling tools, and minimizing direct contact entirely. Home aquarium keepers who maintain mantis shrimp species specifically warn new hobbyists extensively about this risk. Online forums dedicated to mantis shrimp keeping contain numerous first-hand accounts of injury from improper handling. The animal is not aggressive toward humans in the sense of actively seeking out confrontation, but a startled or threatened mantis shrimp will use the same explosive strike it uses on prey and rivals, against anything it perceives as a direct threat, including a human finger reaching into its territory. This is why experienced keepers describe mantis shrimp as requiring genuine respect rather than casual handling. Despite their small size, and despite looking from a distance like a relatively harmless small crustacean. Now let's return to the visual system one more time, because there is a final detail worth including. Researchers have found that mantis shrimp vision includes sensitivity extending into the ultraviolet range. This means they can perceive light wavelengths that are completely invisible to human vision entirely. Several species have markings on their bodies, and especially around their eyes, that reflect ultraviolet light strongly. These markings are believed to play a role in both mate recognition and rival assessment during confrontations. A mantis shrimp displaying these ultraviolet markings during a territorial dispute may be signaling information about its size, strength, or reproductive status to a rival or potential mate, information that would be completely invisible to a human observer watching the same interaction. This means much of mantis shrimp social communication is happening in a visual channel humans cannot perceive at all. When researchers want to study these interactions properly, they need specialized cameras capable of detecting ultraviolet light. Without this equipment, a significant portion of what is actually happening during a mantis shrimp encounter remains completely invisible to the human researchers attempting to document and understand the behavior. This combination of ultraviolet sensitivity, circular polarization detection, and 12 to 16 color channels means the mantis shrimp may be experiencing its environment through a visual channel so different from human vision that researchers genuinely struggle to model or simulate what that perceptual experience might actually resemble. It is one of the clearest examples in nature of perceiving reality through fundamentally different sensory hardware than the architecture humans use to interpret that exact same physical environment. While occupying the exact same physical environment and the exact same reef that human divers swim through regularly, seeing none of what the mantis shrimp sees in that same water at the same moment in time. There is also a reason most of this research is relatively recent rather than centuries old. Mantis shrimp are extremely difficult to study in controlled laboratory conditions long-term. Their explosive strike force makes standard handling and testing equipment risky to use around them directly. Several research groups have had to design custom enclosures specifically rated to survive repeated strikes. High-speed camera technology capable of capturing the strike at sufficient frame rates did not exist until relatively recently. The strike happens in under 3 milliseconds, far faster than standard video equipment could meaningfully record. It was only with the development of cameras capable of filming at tens of thousands of frames per second that researchers could actually see what was happening during the strike rather than only measuring its aftermath. This is part of why so many of the discoveries about mantis shrimp have emerged within the last 20 to 30 years. The animal itself has existed essentially unchanged for tens of millions of years, but the tools required to actually observe and measure what it was doing did not exist until very recently in comparison. This is a pattern that shows up repeatedly across animal behavior research generally. An organism does something extraordinary for an extremely long evolutionary timescale, and humans only develop the capacity to actually observe and understand it within a tiny fraction of that timescale. The mantis shrimp was cracking shells, generating cavitation bubbles, and seeing circularly polarized light for millions of years before any human technology existed that was capable of detecting any of it at all. We are essentially the first generation of observers in the entire history of this animal's existence, who have had the equipment necessary to actually see what it has been doing the whole time. I want to go back to that aquarium in England for a moment before finishing this, to the cracked glass and the staff finding it the next morning with no explanation, to the staff finding the damage with no immediate explanation for what had happened overnight. A single strike from a single animal weighing only a few grams had done that. The same animal that sees colors through 16 receptor channels instead of the human 3. The same animal that detects a property of light almost nothing else on Earth can detect. The same animal that maintains a monogamous bond with one partner for 20 years inside a shared burrow. The same animal that recognizes specific neighbors and adjusts its aggression accordingly over repeated encounters. All of that complexity packed into something a few centimeters long, hidden almost entirely inside a hole in the sand somewhere on a reef, visible for only a fraction of a second if you happen to be looking at exactly the right moment. Most divers swim past dozens of mantis shrimp burrows without ever seeing the animal inside. They see a flash of color, a blur of motion, and then nothing at all. The burrow looks completely empty again within less than a second. And inside that burrow, an animal capable of cracking aquarium glass continues seeing a version of the reef that no human diver swimming past will ever be able to perceive. Write in the comments if you already knew any of this before watching today, because I genuinely did not expect a creature this small to contain this much unresolved science inside it.